Joining us now to weigh in on this is the president of the Association of LA Deputy District Attorneys, Michele Hanisee. Michele, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So if you were to just give us your knee-jerk reaction to all of the sentences that we've seen commuted, what would that be?
You know, the commuted sentences and the pardons, you got to remember, these are two different things. The commuted sentences, not thrilled, but they're not that bad. Other than one individual who was terminally ill, he converted sentences of life without parole to sentences of 20 to 25 to life. So it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. They're still facing the parole board.
Now, which is the one that you have a problem with?
Well, if the commuted sentences, some of them, there was like 99, I think, total. There was a whole slew of them. It was a 99-page document. And if you go through them one by one, some of them are bad murders. They're murders that, drug deals or collecting drug money. But if these documents the governor has put out are to be believed, these are individuals who have performed exemplary in prison and have recommendations even from prison staff, prison wardens, and police officers who worked on their cases. So again, I don't think it's, of all the things the governor has done in his tenure, this is not, in my mind, as bad as some of the laws he's passed.
Well, I just don't understand why. If you're going to commute the sentences for people, I understand they're abused women who then lash out against their abusers. There are people who were convicted of crimes where we've since changed the laws, and for marijuana, for example, and they have that on their record. That I totally understand. But under zero circumstances would I ever think it would be appropriate to commute the sentence of someone who was convicted of murder by a judge and jury.
Well, the governor has that power, and the reason he has that power is our government thinks that it is appropriate in some circumstances, and it's not a legal argument. It's purely a grant of mercy. And like I said, all you can say about it is it's not a get-out-of-jail-free card. He's changed them from a no parole option to the possibility of obtaining parole, and a lot of these people have already served 20, 30 years into their sentence. So it's not as if they're escaping punishment entirely, but it is being reduced. But again, the judge and jury have the power to convict and sentence. The governor has the power to commute sentences.
I just think there's too much of a focus on rehabilitation up there, because if you're guilty of murder and you're sent to prison because you killed someone, especially if it's in the first degree, if you killed someone in cold blood, punishment is the number one objective, in my opinion, of the California Correctional Institution. Then after that, rehabilitation we can worry about, but you need to be punished for what you did. And if they said that you were supposed to go to prison for life, I don't understand why anyone would step in and circumvent that.
Well, and I understand what you're saying, and I ask myself all the time, what are those unforgivable crimes? The point at which it doesn't matter how much you are actually rehabilitated and turn your way of thinking around. We're just going to say, no, you took a life. You are going to spend the rest of your life in prison with no opportunity of release. That's a policy question, and it's a moral question.
The bottom line is the governor is allowed to do this, and there's nothing we can do about it, correct? So that's that.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. And on the flip side, he has vetoed a number of paroles our parole board has granted. Remember, our parole board wanted to let out Leslie Van Houten and these cop killers, and the governor has vetoed those grants of parole.
Oh, yes. I'm very, very familiar with that. I was a part of that case with Deborah Tate. We marched up 130,000 signatures to the governor to keep, I don't think he wants that as his legacy, to be the first governor to let one of the Manson killers out. I think it's such an infamous case. So these lesser cases that, not lesser because there's somebody dead at the hands of this person, but the cases that aren't as publicized, then it's easier for him to do this. But, I'm just thankful he denied Leslie. Thank God.
Yes. And as to these three who were facing deportation, you've got to look at the facts of those cases. These are three individuals who came to the U.S. legally as refugee immigrants, refugees from the Cambodian genocide when they were infants and toddlers. So they really didn't come. They were brought to the U.S. Mm-hmm. Each of them had committed a crime, and the one did commit a murder. He was sentenced as a juvenile and only did 6 years. That's a function of the juvenile sentencing law. It's not anything the governor's done. And they have each served the entirety of their sentences and apparently lived not just just crime-free lives, but exemplary lives since then. They've been in the U.S. and out of custody for a decade or more, and suddenly the federal government wants to deport them to a country they have never known, which is no longer the country it was. Cambodia is a lovely place now, but arguably one can see why they feel like this is their home. And under the circumstances, you could see why the governor might want to grant those pardons. And you got to remember, a pardon doesn't mean they have to serve less time. They've served all their time. The pardon frees them from the collateral consequences of a criminal conviction, say that 3 times fast, one of which could be deportation.
When Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the final days of his administration, he let a bunch of people out of prison, including Fabian Nunez's son, who was convicted of murder. Pled guilty, by the way, so the facts of that case weren't in dispute. Do you see any scenario where Jerry Brown at the 11th hour decides he's going to let a bunch of people out who he's been denying before for the previous 7 years and change?
I'll tell you what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid he's going to commute the sentences of everyone on death row. That's what concerns me. He has some limitations on who he can grant pardons and clemency to, and there's rules about people with multiple convictions, but the standards for that are very, very narrow. It's an abuse of discretion standard. So it does concern me. And the difference of what you just pointed out is Governor Schwarzenegger in the Nunez case, that was to everyone like a political favor to a buddy, right? This particular set of pardons and commutations by the governor all look to be purely acts of mercy by him, not because of any political motivation to help a political buddy. So there's a distinction to be made.
Is he making noises that he might commute the sentence of everyone on death row?
Well, there was a funny thing that happened after Prop 66 passed, is our Supreme Court came out with an advisory opinion about the governor's power to grant pardons and clemency. And that's weird, because I didn't think that Supreme Courts gave out advisory, I think they call it an administrative opinion. And it basically says this rule that prohibits the governor from granting pardons or clemency to a person with 2 prior felony convictions, if we have to review that, it's going to be for abuse of discretion only. And this is a case where you're granting someone mercy to be merciful. So how can you say you abuse your discretion anytime you're making a decision based on mercy? And I thought, why are they coming out with this now, at this particular juncture, after Prop 66 has passed and been upheld by the courts? It seems suspicious.
All right. Michele Hanisee, president of the Association of L.A. Deputy District Attorneys. Thanks so much for stopping by. We always love chatting with you.
Thanks, Michele.
My pleasure.